Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here again with another review for you. This time I'm talking the Flash episodes Nora and Blocked. Now, I'm decided to review these two together because when the first episode of this season came out, I was actually on vacation in Tokyo. And yeah, I was just not in a good position to sit down and watch the Flash. Much less, review it from my hotel room. So I just said, okay, well, we'll just sort of do the first two episodes of the season together. It gives me a little bit more material to work with anyway. So let's get right into it. So these two episodes are, pretty solid stuff. I mean, of course, the big thing is just setting everything up for this season and of introducing us to our big bad, setting up some of the big mysteries that are going to be going on. And I mean, it does just perfectly good job. I mean, these episodes, there's nothing I can really say that's seriously wrong with them, but they're definitely not the sort of edge of your seat episodes. But again, these are the first two episodes of the season, so it's set up, set up, set up, set up, set up. So let's just kind of get right into some things. Nothing really particular to say about the villains for this episode. I vaguely remember Gridlock from some old Impulse comics way back in the day, but wasn't a character that particularly stood out to me. I mean, if you're gonna dust off a character from that era, dust off somebody like White Lightning, who was quite, even though she only really appeared, I think, one time, was actually quite amusing, and they definitely seem to set her up for having an interesting backstory that, to the best of my knowledge, never really came to fruition, which I always thought was unfortunate. But anyway, um, let's see. So let's just kind of run through everybody. Cecile and her whole situation with the telepathy. I do like that they are doing a nice job of really fleshing Cecile out. I mean, her as a good supporting character, they did a solid job with that last season. Here, she's continuing to be, a character who has her own stuff going on. I kind of wish they would sort of rotate her back into being a cop again, just so that not everything involving her revolved around her baby. But this is the baby is still pretty young, so okay, I can let that slide a bit. Um, Now I did like her whole thing of like, I share a telepathic connection to my child, and you know, it's really hard not to sympathize with that. I mean, children are, especially very young ones, no matter what you do, sometimes you can't understand what it is that's upsetting, what's bothering them. Um, Sorry, I have a stupid pop-up that appeared right there on my screen. So I imagine that just being able to have that connection at a time when they're too young to really communicate with you in a traditional sense would be an enormous thing that you wouldn't want to give up. But I do like how when Cecile is like, "Yeah, I'm gonna stick this psychic gizmo on the baby's head," Joe is like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa." And to her credit, when Joe kind of like says like, "Okay, look, you need to sort of stop for a minute and really think about what it is you're planning to do here." Cecile does lay her case out, but she does ultimately come to realize that Joe's right. This is taking it too far. And it's really just sort of her, I mean, she even says, I haven't been the mother to a newborn in a long time. And, something like that, you don't want to screw it up. And that's something that I imagine you probably could get rusty at. So it's really just the anxiety of being a new parent and wanting to be a good parent that is really kind of pushing her down this road. But again, she and Joe have a talk, and ultimately she realizes, hey, I'm pushing this too far, and she backs off. I mean, it's always good to see people being mature adults about things. And we'll come back to that a little bit more later on. Speaking of adults dealing with stuff, one thing that really didn't work for me too much in these episodes was the stuff with Cisco trying to get over Gypsy. I don't know if this whole psychic explanation was really necessary. I mean, Cisco was seriously in love with this lady. It didn't work out. He's super bummed about it. I don't really think too much more needs to be said. But it did kind of bring some lightheartedness to these otherwise rather serious episodes. And does kind of, have us start working towards Cisco moving on and probably somewhere down the road later this season, finding some sort of new romantic interest. And also, again, kind of shows some more time with him, showing him being buds with Ralph and being friends with Caitlin. And I love how Ralph knows Cisco well enough to push his buttons by saying Han shot second. Yeah, that's the sort of thing that will get a nerd trying to strangle you. Caitlin's whole subplot about her dad, and I like how they use the name of the villain Icicle as the phony name on the death certificate for the death certificate corner. That was a cute touch. Well, we know for a fact that metahumans have existed before the particle accelerator explosion. Like, for example, Obsidian over on Legends of Tomorrow. He had superhuman powers back in the 1940s. And, never mind, like, Vandal Savage and Hawkman and Hawkgirl. But we're not going to worry about that too awful much. But anyways, it is kind of interesting to see where this might potentially go. And definitely would not be averse to seeing Caitlin's mom again. I really did like when they kind of went there and we learned more about who Caitlin was before she came to Star Labs. I thought that was nicely done, and again, was a good way of rounding her out as a character. And the idea that, Killer Frost is something that's sort of been lurking inside her ever since she was a child. Well, I mean, okay, it feels like a retcon, because it is, probably, almost certainly, really. But I can live with these sort of retcons. I mean, retcon is such a dirty word these days. And not without good reason. I mean, I have endured more bad retcons than I care to think of over the course of reading comics and watching TV shows and stuff. There's sort of just moments where you're like, what in the name of God made you think this was a good idea? But storytelling is, at the end of the day, a fluid thing. And comics were never intended to be things that were carved in stone like the Ten Commandments, or the Code of Hammurabi, or whatever the hell you want to go for. So, yeah, I mean, this is just how storytelling works. So, as long as people think about these sort of things carefully and actually have a plan going in, I can kind of live with it. Let's see, what do we have to do? What else do we have to talk about here? Sorry, I'm trying to sort all this stuff out and not actually start talking about the season premiere of Arrow at the same time. Let's see. Oh yeah, I did like seeing Barry back at his job. The whole Barry's a CSI thing, that's kind of cool. And it's interesting that Nora also grew up to be a CSI. But again, that totally fits in with the big thing for these episodes is that Nora doesn't remember Barry. She grew up just with Iris, and it was really kind of an interesting moment when it really kind of hit Iris that in this future that Nora comes from, she and her daughter really don't have a great relationship. But I do have to say that Iris really did get one of probably the standout moment of these episodes, where she basically just says, like, okay, so Nora says that Barry vanishes and then never returns. Well, screw that. We're Team Flash, and giving the finger to timelines and fate and destiny, that's what we do. And everybody kind of was like, you know what, she's right. Yeah, screw this. Barry's fate isn't written in stone. We know that. So, I mean, a lot of props to Iris there. That's, yeah, man. I mean, like, yeah, go Iris. Good job there. And I did like how Nora spent all this time talking about like, I found this in the museum and this, that, that. And everything is this the museum, and it's ultimately pointed out to Barry by Joe. It's like she grew up literally with you on a pedestal. All she knows about you is what she knows in a museum. Of course, she's trying to impress you, and he really does a great job of bringing it back around to just Nora unknowingly acting exactly like Barry did when he was a kid. And I really like how Barry dealt with that. He went out and he sat Nora down, and he's just like, "Look, I'm not perfect. I'm not some guy, some flawless godlike being. I'm just a guy, and I made so many stupid mistakes when I was starting out. Barry still makes plenty of stupid mistakes. I wasn't good at this whole Flash thing right out of the gate. I mean, he had to be trained how to be the Flash by his mortal enemy. And oh man, that bit where he's talking about phasing, and we get to see like season one Eobard Thawne Harrison Wells. It's like, oh yeah, that's the stuff. I mean, Tom Cavanaugh is a fantastic actor. I love the guy to death. But oh man, there's nothing he's done on any of this CW stuff that's as good as when he's being Eobard Thawne. And not to take anything away from what was his name, Matt Lester, who's sort of like the other face we have for Eobard Thawne. He's amazing too. Oh my God, there are just no words for how much I hate Eobard Thawne. But that's just because he's such a great villain. He's like, I mean, he's a perfect embodiment of a bad guy you love to hate because he's such a selfish jerk. But anyway, that was just a beautiful moment of continuity. I'm really digging the XS costume too. Traditionally, XS in the comics is actually Barry's granddaughter Jenny, and she doesn't do the mask thing. But I'm down with that. That's cool. It works. The XS costume works well here on the show, and yeah, I mean it's just good stuff. Nora is a really nice, solid addition to this cast. I'm really digging her. I mean, it's really hard not to love Nora. Now, Cicada is a villain. I vaguely remember the main story where he was introduced years and years ago, and I remember it being a pretty good story, but it's just the details don't really escape me. Didn't really stick with me, and I remember thinking like, okay, why exactly is this guy called Cicada again? I don't know. Maybe I missed something in the story, or it's just been so many years that I just don't remember. Personally, I find it kind of a little bit weird that I currently live in Japan, where cicadas are an iconic part of nature here, and yet here it is. I'm watching this American TV show where a character named Cicada is a big deal. It's also kind of weird that I always forget the Japanese word for this insect, and when I've tried talking about it to people here, they are always like, cicada, what's that? So, I mean, of course, they have a different word for it in Japanese that, again, I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember. But it just always seems so weird to me that this thing that I consider such an iconic part of, like the culture and nature of Japan, if I actually try to talk about it with them, people here just don't know that word. Again, cicada is the English name for this insect, not the Japanese name. But yeah, nice stuff with that knife. I mean, it looks seriously creepy, and the fact that this guy would have killed Ralph, Cisco, and Barry if it hadn't been for Nora, that was good stuff. Definitely a moment there. I just want to know, what exactly is Cicada's job? I mean, he's sitting there, shirtless in some locker room, holding this funky looking knife, and this dude that he apparently works with just walks in and is just like, oh, hey man, you look like crap. Were you in a fight? And he just goes, yeah. And it just was like, oh, see you out on the floor. I mean, where does this guy work? I mean, the only thing that could really only thing that popped into my mind was a slaughterhouse or something. I mean, if you see a dude sitting shirtless with a knife and you think nothing of it, man, I don't want to work there. And it is actually canon that there are slaughterhouses in Central City. Um, I remember actually a story, an old Flash I know, I think, where part of the story was set in a slaughterhouse. And again, a big city having a slaughterhouse isn't exactly something that's especially shocking. Um, and yeah, I think that's enough for now, guys. Glad to be back doing reviews of Flash again. Looking forward to what I think is going to be a really cool season. Until next time, everybody, take care and have a good one.